Welcome to episode 7 of Rabbit Hole Reviews. Today we're going to have a quick tabletop review of the Charter Arms Bulldog in 44 Special. So this revolver is on loan to me. I took it out yesterday and ran a box of 44 Special through it. In this case, I was using the ammo that I had available, which was Grizzly 260 grain hard cast projectiles. If you take a look at these rounds, they're pretty impressive. Of course, look at that cross section of the 44 Magnum. It's just you can literally see the bullet holes at distance on your target just because of the diameter, kind of like 45. Anyway, so what is a Charter Arms Bulldog? Well, Charter Arms has been making, it's a company that makes, I would say, economically priced revolvers. They've been doing so since the early 70s. The Bulldog went into production in 1973, has been in pretty much continuous production since that time. By the mid-1980s, they'd already made over 500,000 Charter Arms revolvers. And if you look on their website, they have a whole range of different models. In fact, I am going to not buy this model, not because it's not good, but I'm going to in the near future, I'm going to buy a 38/357 stainless version of one of their revolvers, which we'll get into towards the end. This one is in 44 Special. Now, 44 Special, is obviously doesn't have the power of the 44 Magnum, but in its own right, it's not exactly a slouch. So this load here in particular is 950 feet per second at the muzzle and has 521 foot-pounds of energy. So to compare that to a 38 Special load, a common loading would be 158 grain full metal jacket running roughly 750 feet per second and only has 200 foot-pounds of energy, right? And that, if you look at the mass, I mean, it's 260 grains, and in this case, you've got, solid cast bullet. So anything you hit with this round it's going to drop. For sure. In fact, I think this kind of loading is a little bit much for this gun. Of course, it can definitely handle it. But I read in the literature that the Charter Arms guns prefer lighter weight bullets. So something like a Speer Goldat with in a lighter range, not 260, is going to increase accuracy according to them. And also, it's probably going to have a positive impact on the overall recoil. The recoil on this gun wasn't particularly bad, even with the fact that it's roughly 22 ounces loaded, something like that. We'll put it on the scale in a minute. The real issue with any kind of handling on this gun isn't the round that it shoots. It actually can handle that quite well, despite its weight. It's, if you look at the grip and you look at my hand, it's a very small grip. And that's to be expected. This is designed for concealed carry, but you look, I'm not getting a full purchase on the gun. My pinky finger is just hanging out. It's doable. It's just not ideal. So that's really the only thing that impacts the handling somewhat. And that's actually my only negative that I could really come up with in my relatively short time with this gun. Maybe a rubber grip or maybe a slightly bigger grip option might help. But then again, that kind of goes against the whole purpose of this gun. This is in my mind, like a quintessential Saturday Night Special, which is a whole class of inexpensive handguns, kind of like a throwdown gun. You buy these. My advice would be to buy these used. If you can find clean ones at auction sites or maybe in a pawn shop or gun store. They're not particularly expensive when they're new. I don't want to get into the prices because that's subject to change and it depends on what model you opt for. But if you buy these used and they're in decent shape, don't get a beater unless you don't care about that sort of thing. If you can find one used, you're definitely going to take advantage of the depreciation on a gun like this. This is not a Smith & Wesson. This is not a Colt. This is strictly just to buy and shoot a lot of it. And that kind of goes in line with why I would want the 38/357 version of a Charter Arms. Simply for logistics. I have considerably more 38/357 revolvers. I have considerably more rounds for it. The rounds are easier to obtain. I think that's kind of not really an arguable point. You can find 38 special much more commonly than you'd find 44 special on a shelf somewhere. And you have the option of course, carrying 357, which when you look at 357 Magnum compared to 44 Special, you're definitely closing the gap there. So I think 357 out of a gun like this is definitely going to get the job done as well, because in its own right, 357 isn't a slouch in terms of muzzle energy. A couple of notable features about this gun. One thing I didn't really realize until after I was taking a closer look and cleaning the gun is that the trigger guard is actually, if you notice, it's a slightly different shade of the rest of the gun, and that's because it's polymer, and I wasn't really aware of that. So that definitely shaves a few ounces off the weight, I would guess, and I'm guessing they did that mainly for weight savings and probably for economizing. It's definitely cheaper to do that, but it doesn't feel cheap. It's, again, I didn't notice it until I took a closer look. We can take a look at the sights. The sights are non-adjustable, but they pick up pretty well. I was shooting high on my, the limited rounds I fired. I fired roughly 25 rounds through this gun. I was tracking high initially, and then once I found the point of aim, I was hitting center mass at 21 feet. So at 7 yards, that's probably the extreme distance that I would be shooting a gun like this. Again, this is a concealed carry, put it in the front jacket of a pocket and whip it out and just point and shoot. It's not really designed for, I would think, target use, but it's actually, the sights are not bad. Now, of course, windage didn't need to be adjusted because, well, that's good because you can't actually adjust anything. But yeah, I mean, it's shot, aside from getting your point of aim on sorted out, once you do that, you can repeatedly do quite well. And oddly enough, when I was shooting double action, I was shooting better groups than I was single action. And I found that pretty interesting. The trigger pull is roughly in the 12-pound range, 10 to 12-pound range. We're going to put it on the gauge. And the single action is considerably lighter. It's roughly 4 to 5 pounds. And I like the trigger pull of the double action more than I like the trigger pull of the single action, which is, for me, revolvers, I always prefer single action, but in this case, I prefer double action in this gun, and I'm not sure why. The trigger pull is actually quite good I think for this class of gun and the weight of the trigger. It doesn't feel like it's not terrible. When I go to single action, it's okay. It's light, but it just feels kind of flimsy when I pull the hammer back. That could just be me getting used to the gun. Keep in mind, I'm no expert on revolvers. I'm probably really no expert on anything if you really want to get into it. But I actually like this gun. I kind of went into it with a little bit of a bias. I figured, okay, this is going to be one of those, it's Charter Arms, insert whatever joke you want to insert about it. But I was pleasantly surprised in the overall function of the gun, the accuracy. Even with its small size, it was surprisingly controllable for the amount of real estate I had to hang on to it. I would probably opt for some aftermarket rubber grips rather than these wood grips. They're not bad. I'm sure this is, regular press checkering, nothing fancy. It gets the job done. But I think some Hogues or some hard rubber grips would help. And so let's put it on the scale real quick. We want to keep this video well under 20 minutes. So for those of you who may not know, let's take a look. The Charter Arms Bulldog 44 was the weapon of choice for David Berkowitz, the son of Sam Killer in New York in the late 70s, mid to late 70s. He went on a killing spree. And of course, he's still in prison and will be there forever. Okay, so 18.85 ounces, not bad. We're talking about a 44 special handgun here. And what we're going to do now, anyway, for those of you who know anything about, crime history, true crime kind of things, it's David Berkowitz. I might be dating myself a little bit by bringing up a guy who was on a killing spree almost 50 years ago. But Yeah, so he used a Charter Arms Bulldog. I'm pretty sure it wasn't exactly this model, and I'm pretty sure his didn't have a polymer trigger guard. But all right, so now we have 5 rounds of 260 grain 44 special in the cylinder. We're going to take a look and see what the actual weight is if this were in your pocket with this load. Again, I wouldn't carry this load if I was using this as a truck gun, which is one of the great uses of this kind of pistol, or as a concealed carry. I would carry something lighter like a Speer Gold Dot. So 23.15 ounces. And you have 5 rounds of 44 special. So not bad in my mind. The trade-off is, yes, you only have 5 rounds. Let's take a look. You have a plunger ejector. So typical, nothing fancy there. Typical revolver fare. We will clear this out of the way. Overall, just a really basic, honest handgun. It doesn't have a lot of pretenses about it. Doesn't really, you don't see any marketing for Charter Arms really. They just kind of exist in the background, and they've been cranking these revolvers out for, well, 50 years now. So would I get this gun? Just like I talked about in the beginning, I would say I would get this, and I plan to get one of these just to have it as part of the collection. I really appreciate the angle, the market that Charter Arms is filling here. It's a lower cost revolver. Yeah, I mean, it's roughly, well, I've been looking at street prices for different guns. I think if you shop hard for a new one, you're in the 300 range. And if you go for used, that could be anyone all the way down to, whatever you can find. So for that price, I think you're okay. It's just one of those guns where it doesn't pretend to be anything it isn't. It's a straight up, utility. It is. If a gun could be described as a hammer, this would be a hammer. Maybe a mallet, a wooden mallet, right? But it gets it done. A perfect truck gun. Perfect. Hey, I got a cabin somewhere or a beach house, and I don't want to haul guns to it when I go on vacation. So I'm going to hide one of these in an attic or a closet somewhere stashed away. And you can buy these guns used and have them, multiple examples of them, take it fishing, take it hunting, take it in a truck, whatever, on a boat, whatever you want to do. You're not really worried about beating the crap out of it because you bought it at a pawn shop for a couple $100. But yeah, even for that money, I think you're getting quite a bit for that price range. And like I said, the accuracy was quite good for what it was. Now I could have chosen different loads and probably got even better accuracy out of it, but it was perfectly acceptable. I could put all 5 rounds within, within an 8-inch circle at 21 feet without trying at all. And that's double action. Is that amazing? No, but it's definitely will get the job done. So let's go ahead and do a couple trigger pulls. We're coming up on almost 14 minutes, and we'll see what those numbers are. We'll safety check the revolver yet again. So an interesting thing about this gun is, if you notice, it has a transfer bar safety. So if you pull the hammer back, there's no firing pin on the hammer. The firing pin's internal to the inside the frame. And if you look, it's like a Ruger GP100, which I'll be reviewing down the line. This weapon is drop safe because that transfer bar blocks the rear of the firing pin. So you have to actually pull the trigger, and when that happens, this lowers the transfer bar and allows the hammer to make contact with the rear of the firing pin. So that's definitely a nice touch. I can definitely appreciate that. Let's take a look. So we're going to go ahead and do double action first, because that's probably the way you're going to draw a weapon and crank a round off, would be double action first. Let's get the trigger guard or trigger gauge queued up. All right, so this is right at 10 pounds. I think it's going to be less than 12 pounds. It's going to be between 10 and 11 is my guess. 10.2 pounds. And final trigger pull and single action. Oh, 8.6. We'll do a redo on that one. All right, so it came in at 9.4 for the final double action. Single action is going to be considerably lighter. Let's see what we're working with. £3.4 pounds. £4, and one final trigger pull. I would probably put some sort of fluorescent paint on the front sight. 3.8 pounds. I would probably put something on the front sight to differentiate your target from the front blade. I think that's part of the reason why I was shooting high on this gun initially. It's me going through the learning curve of the pistol, but also not being able to pick up where the top of my front sight ended, right? So your point of aim is changing each time because especially if you're shooting at a black target. Obviously that'll be different if you're outside and it's daylight and you're shooting something that isn't wearing a black shirt, right? If it's a white background, you're going to be able to pick up the contrast. But that's probably something I would do. I would put some sort of paint or something on the front blade, just because there's no adjustability in the rear. They are gutter sights, but they're actually pretty good. I have Smith & Wessons that don't have sights anywhere near as good. And so in summary, I recommend these guns simply because it's just an example of a gun getting the job done without an enormous price tag. Some of these Smith & Wessons and Colts and even Rugers, they can get up there in price. Revolvers, nice quality revolvers are not inexpensive, even used Smiths. They're just not that inexpensive anymore. And this is a good alternative, I think. So I would say get it if you just want to have a gun in a truck, on a boat, just to throw in a backpack when you're going hiking. Really, it'll get the job done. You got 5 rounds of 44 special or 5 rounds of 357 or 38. So there's definitely firepower there. You're going to have to manage that. I would say get it. And obviously for home defense, probably not so much. You don't have the round count. You don't have a lot of different features that I've talked about in other videos. But I don't think people are buying this for home defense. And really for collecting, I don't think there's really any collector value in this. I'll have it just because I appreciate it. And the one I buy will get shot quite a bit because if anything else, I'll fire fewer rounds out of my higher end guns. And I don't have much of an issue running hundreds and hundreds of rounds through this at a time. So in closing, since we're coming up on 20 minutes, that has been my review of the Charter Arms Bulldog in 44 Special.